Julius Caesar, the Titans rise and fall, a Roman Empire journey for peaceful sleep, sound of subtle ambient Roman-era music, distant murmurs of an ancient city fading in gently. Narrator. Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to Forgotten Scrolls. In the ancient Roman Empire, many men etched their names forever into the course of history. Some are remembered as courageous and astute commanders. Others gained fame for being cruel, or even cowardly. But one name continues to echo through the centuries: Gaius Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was born on June 13th, 100 BC. As a child, Caesar already showed an aptitude for adventure, a courageous, active, and well-disposed boy. But at just 16 years old, his life would undergo a great change. His father had passed away, and Caesar suddenly became the head of the family. Julius Caesar was the nephew of Gaius Marius, a great general and politician famous for his military victories and for his reforms that reorganized the model of the Roman legions. Marius was known for having a magnetic personality and for being highly respected by the soldiers who fought by his side. This undoubtedly influenced the character of young Julius Caesar, who saw in his uncle a role model to follow. But during his adolescence, his uncle entered into a civil war against the ambitious Lucius Cornelius Sulla, where they fought for control of the city of Rome. Amidst the chaos of this civil war, Julius Caesar married the daughter of his uncle's political ally. Her name was Cornelia Cinna, with whom he had a daughter who would be named Julia. Gaius Marius lost his life during a battle, and Cornelius Sulla assumed the position of dictator, a title that placed him above Roman laws, granting him almost absolute power in the city. Even without direct involvement in the conflict, Julius Caesar felt threatened by the new dictator and his uncle's tormentor. Seeing no other alternative and seeking to distance himself from Rome as quickly as possible, Julius Caesar enlisted in the army, where he was sent to fight in distant lands located in Turkey. Julius Caesar served the army with great distinction, even receiving the civic crown as a reward for his heroic actions. He earned the recognition of his superiors and veteran soldiers, demonstrating a promising future as a military commander. In 78 BC, Julius Caesar received news that his family's rival was dead. The dictator had passed away suddenly, and for Julius Caesar, this meant a chance to return home. After fulfilling his contract in the army, Julius Caesar returned home, but to his misfortune, his inheritance had been confiscated by Sulla's abusive government. To make a living, Caesar used his powerful voice and his skill in oratory to become a successful lawyer. Working diligently, Julius Caesar managed to restore his family's social status. Chapter 1. The young Caesar's first steps. When Julius Caesar was about 25 years old, he was on a sea voyage across the Aegean Sea. The ship he was on was attacked by pirates. Most of the crew ended up being killed. The few survivors were captured to be sold as slaves. For those born into wealthy families, a high price would be charged for ransom. Again, far from home and in a desperate situation, the future seemed uncertain and gloomy for Julius Caesar. Days seemed to drag slowly as Julius Caesar was held prisoner on a pirate ship. When his captors discovered that Julius Caesar belonged to a well-to-do family, they began to demand a large sum of money for his release. The pirates demanded a large quantity of silver coins in exchange for Caesar's life, a value that was absurd for the time. But Julius Caesar was always a proud and fearless man. He told the pirates that his life was worth much more than what was demanded, but he warned them that once free, he would scour the seas for these pirates and have his revenge. The pirates laughed at Caesar, and throughout the voyage, they mocked him for his arrogance. The ransom was paid, and Caesar was finally free, and now he was ready to get his revenge. Using his gifts in the art of oratory, he managed to attract sailors and warriors to his cause, and using part of his fortune, he assembled a fleet of ships. Caesar spent many months sailing and confronting pirate ships, and every victory he obtained brought him new profits from the spoils he took from captured ships. When Julius Caesar finally found the pirates who had abducted him, he defeated them in battle and ordered the crucifixion of all survivors. The pirates paid a high price for mocking and underestimating Julius Caesar's determination. This event increased Caesar's fame, and his name was frequently repeated in the streets of Rome. When he returned home, he was summoned to join the army, and once again had to leave to fight in foreign lands. And again, Julius Caesar distinguished himself in various types of battle, thus earning the position of military tribune, which guaranteed him the right to command a large number of soldiers and the opportunity to run for public office. Julius Caesar finally returned to Rome in 69 BC, beginning his political career by taking on a new position in the Roman Senate. His wife Cornelia had become pregnant again, and everything seemed to be going smoothly in Caesar's life. But to Julius's misfortune, his beloved wife passed away that same year due to a complicated childbirth that claimed her life and that of their baby. Shortly after his wife's funeral, Julius Caesar was sent to serve in Spain, and in this Roman province he was to act as administrator of the territories controlled by Rome. One day, while Julius Caesar was inspecting the city of Gades, he came across a statue already quite weathered by time. As Caesar approached, he realized the statue was a representation of Alexander the Great. Upon reaching the feet of the statue, Caesar was overcome with great anguish and began to shed tears. He was already 33 years old and felt that he had not yet accomplished anything grand in his life. At his age, Alexander the Great had already conquered almost the entire known world. At this moment, Caesar swore that he would not rest until the day he could equal Alexander the Great in his conquests. Julius Caesar fulfilled his role very well in the Roman province of Spain. He gained fame as a good governor and subdued 2 local tribes who had rebelled against the Roman occupation. But Caesar was not content with having to spend so much time away from Rome, and soon after completing the required service time in Spain, he returned to his hometown. Back in Rome, Julius focused his efforts on attaining new political offices. Caesar aspired to the position of Pontifex Maximus, which was the highest priestly office in Roman religion. However, he was running against 2 high-ranking senators, and to continue his campaign, Caesar spent almost his entire personal fortune. Julius Caesar knew he could not fail to get the new position. Otherwise, he would go bankrupt, and his political career would be over. Such a campaign required many financial resources, and to overcome this problem, Julius allied himself with Marcus Licinius Crassus, a powerful politician famous for being the wealthiest man in Rome. Crassus paid half of Julius Caesar's debts and guaranteed the rest, proving to be a valuable ally. Julius Caesar managed to win the elections and assume the position he desired, but he was still burdened by a gigantic debt to Marcus Crassus. Chapter 2. Forging the First Triumvirate. This alliance did not go unnoticed by one of the powerful men of Rome. The renowned General Pompey, who had an active voice in the Roman Senate and was respected and even feared by other senators, viewed Julius Caesar's growing fame and wealth with disapproval. Without Marcus Crassus's presence in the Senate to support Julius Caesar, General Pompey saw no further reason to tolerate Caesar's existence and began to make serious accusations against him. In his accusations, Pompey alleged that Julius Caesar had illegally extended the term of his campaigns in Gaul, which should have been only 5 years. But Pompey knew this was not true, as he had secretly met with Marcus Crassus and Julius Caesar to decide the city's fate, and in this meeting, they had agreed to give Caesar 5 more years to complete the conquest of Gaul. Another accusation was that Julius Caesar had used the force of his legions for his own benefit, and enriched himself at the expense of the Roman Senate. Pompey issued an order to Julius Caesar, stating that he should disband his legions and return to Rome, where he would face a trial in the Senate. At this point, few senators had enough courage to oppose Pompey's demands. Julius Caesar knew that if he obeyed such an order, his life would be over and all would be lost. He decided to ignore Pompey's order and marched on Rome with his legions to demand due respect, even if it had to be done by force. Thus, in 49 BC, Julius Caesar and his soldiers were declared enemies of Rome in an event that would be recorded in history as the Second Civil War of the Roman Republic. Such a declaration did not shake Caesar, as he already knew of Pompey's animosity towards him, and a direct confrontation between the 2 generals was inevitable. Julius Caesar found himself facing the sad reality that to return home, he would have to attack his own city. Pompey was an experienced general and knew that the city of Rome was not prepared to resist for long against the veteran legions from Gaul. He needed to bring more soldiers to defend the city, and for that, he summoned the legions that were serving in Greece and other nearby provinces. Thus began a race against time, where Pompey anxiously awaited the arrival of more soldiers, while Caesar marched as quickly as possible to reach Rome before Pompey's reinforcements. To worsen Caesar's situation, he faced the Rubicon River on his path. No Roman general was allowed to cross the Rubicon with his legions. Crossing the river would be a point of no return for Caesar, and at this moment, he uttered one of his most famous phrases, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. Crossing the river with his entire army would take a colossal amount of time, and Caesar did not have this luxury. He decided to take a risk and advanced with only a fraction of his legions in a forced march. The remaining legions followed at a slower pace, conserving their strength for the upcoming battle. Days of anguish passed for both commanders, but Caesar's legionaries once again proved their worth and arrived in Rome with astonishing speed. Seeing no other alternative, Pompey gathered his personal guard and, along with some senators and allies, abandoned the city of Rome shortly before Caesar's arrival. Pompey headed for the Roman city of Brundisium, from where he sailed to Greece with the plan to regroup with the legions stationed there and then counterattack Julius Caesar. When Julius Caesar finally entered the city gates, the streets were practically deserted. Roman citizens were uncertain about Caesar's true intentions. He could be returning as a hero or as an enemy of the state, desiring power and revenge. But in truth, they had nothing to fear. Caesar did not allow the legionaries to attack the populace or plunder the city. When the city's mood became calmer, Caesar gave a public speech, reassuring the population, and appointed one of his most trusted men to be in command of the city. The chosen one was Mark Antony, who had served with Julius Caesar in Gaul, where he had proven to be an excellent military commander. Caesar still had to wait a few months to continue his pursuit of Pompey, as new ships needed to be built to transport his legions across the sea. While the ships were being built, Caesar re-established order in the city of Rome, approving new laws, electing new senators, and attending to the city's financial matters. While awaiting the completion of the ships, Caesar went to Spain, where he defeated Pompey's supporters and thus ensured that Rome would not be attacked while he was en route to Greece. In 48 BC, Julius Caesar and Pompey finally clashed at the Battle of Dyrrhachium, which took place in the region of Epirus in Greece. To Caesar's surprise, Pompey had assembled an incredibly numerous army, with about 36,000 infantry soldiers and 7,000 cavalrymen. Julius Caesar and his 22,000 soldiers set up a fortified camp, but Pompey found a weak point in the wooden wall protecting Caesar's camp, and chaos quickly spread. Outnumbered and with his defenses compromised, Julius Caesar had no alternative but to order a full retreat of his forces. This defeat reminded Julius Caesar why Pompey the Great was considered one of the greatest generals of his time, and that he should never be underestimated again. Caesar retreated to a new camp, but now he had little food and potable water for his soldiers. With his provisions running out, Julius Caesar had to act quickly, and so he decided to confront Pompey on the battlefield. Chapter 3: The Gallic Wars and Beyond. On August 9th, 48 BC, the Battle of Pharsalus was fought, which took place in the region of Thessaly in central Greece. The fight had a slow start, with both generals carefully studying each other. A fight between two human armies trained with the same formations and tactics was not something simple to resolve. The battle was extremely fierce, with both sides trying to outflank the adversary. Pompey had the numerical advantage and a larger cavalry, but Caesar's veterans had faced all kinds of challenges and would not be easily subdued. Even at a great disadvantage, Caesar's legions managed to contain the enemy cavalry and outflank Pompey's infantry, thus gaining total control of the battle. Pompey saw his army being destroyed before his eyes, and then he understood that he was not facing an ordinary man. Defeated, Pompey had to retreat as quickly as possible away from the battle. After the defeat, General Pompey found himself in a terrible situation, and most of the senators who had departed with him for Greece were fleeing to other human colonies, and some even went to meet Caesar, begging for forgiveness. Pompey decided to flee to Egypt. He sought refuge among the Egyptian nobility, but did not count on a cruel twist of fate. Some members of the Egyptian elite feared that protecting Pompey would provoke the wrath of Caesar, who was already in the vicinity of Egypt. Pompey was attacked and killed by the Egyptians, and a great general met an inglorious end in foreign lands. When Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt, he was received at the royal palace of Ptolemy III, and as soon as he asked about Pompey's whereabouts, he was presented only with the mortal remains of his old rival. Caesar was furious, for he had planned to forgive Pompey and bring him back to Rome, and even allow him to hold a position in the Senate. The offense was even greater since Pompey was a Roman consul and had been cowardly assassinated by foreigners. Caesar demanded the heads of the men who conspired against Pompey's life, and so it was done. And in the land of the pharaohs, Caesar would still find himself entangled in a web of intrigues. Chapter 4. Caesar in Egypt. Love, power, and intrigue. Julius Caesar faced very hot days in the lands of Egypt, days too hot even for a Roman accustomed to the heat of the capital of the Roman Republic. And the customs of that exotic people brought a certain strangeness to Julius Caesar's eyes. After the long and exhausting pursuit of Pompey, Julius Caesar and his soldiers needed a well-deserved rest, and it was with this intention that Caesar decided to spend a few days in Egypt, staying at the royal palace in the city of Alexandria. From a distance, the Senate elected Caesar to the office of dictator, this being the most powerful position in the Roman Republic. Julius Caesar had finally reached the pinnacle of his political and military career. However, peace never lasted long in Julius Caesar's life. In 48 BC, Egypt was in the midst of a civil war. The famous Queen Cleopatra disputed the royal throne with Ptolemy III, her younger brother. Julius Caesar had no respect for Cleopatra's brother, as Ptolemy was one of those responsible for Pompey's death. Knowing this, Cleopatra began to formulate a plan to meet Caesar. Using creative stratagems, Cleopatra managed to secretly enter Caesar's chambers. This unusual appearance captivated the Romans' attention, and Cleopatra explained the political situation in Egypt to him. It is said that on that very night, Julius Caesar and Cleopatra became lovers. Caesar supported Cleopatra's claim to the throne, guaranteeing the military support of his legions and fighting Ptolemy's troops. A series of battles were fought in this event, known as the Siege of Alexandria. Finally, Ptolemy was completely defeated in the face of the Battle of the Nile, which occurred in 47 BC. The main conflict of this battle was fought in the waters of the Nile River, where Julius Caesar's warships faced Ptolemy's vessels. During the fight, the ship Julius Caesar was on capsized, forcing the great Roman general to swim to the riverbank to save his life. Ptolemy's ship also sank during the battle, but he was not so lucky and ended up disappearing into the waters of the Nile. After this battle, Cleopatra took command of Egypt, and her romance with Julius Caesar was already causing gossip and discontent in Rome. General Mark Antony, who was in command of the city of Rome, was encountering difficulties in maintaining public order. And even receiving harsh criticism, Julius Caesar would not be content with having a secret romance and decided to bring Cleopatra to see the city of Rome, something that was seen as a great insult by many Roman nobles. Julius Caesar would also travel to the Middle East, where he obtained an overwhelming victory against King Pharnaces II's army. It is said that the victory against King Pharnaces was so quick and easy that it inspired Caesar to say one of his most famous phrases, Veni, vidi, vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. Time passed, and the romantic relationship between Caesar and Cleopatra only brought new waves of distrust for the Roman magistrates, as some rumors spoke of Cleopatra having given birth to a son by Julius Caesar. The supposed son of the couple was named Caesarion. However, Julius Caesar never officially recognized the child despite Cleopatra's assurances that Caesar was the father. Many senators began to fear that Julius Caesar was trying to elevate himself to the creator of a new dynasty, and by having a child with the powerful queen of Egypt, he would be starting a lineage of heirs with rights to both Roman and Egyptian territories. Furthermore, there were always those senators and Roman nobles who disliked Julius Caesar and were always looking for reasons to criticize his actions. Some of these senators were former supporters of Pompey, who, even choosing the enemy's side, were forgiven by Caesar. And to make matters worse, there was an occasion during the festival known as Lupercalia, where Mark Antony tried to place a diadem with oak leaves typical of Greek kings on Caesar's head. This gesture was supposed to be a kind of joke, but it was very ill received by those present at the feast. Even though Caesar quickly removed the ornament, Julius Caesar seemed not to care about the opinion of his opponents and began to delegate political positions to friends and family members. And he began to create laws that were approved without the Senate's consent. With this, Caesar further increased his power and his sphere of influence over the city. Even with all his conquests, Caesar still desired to initiate a new military campaign against the powerful Parthian Empire, which stood firm against Roman advances. Chapter 5. The Ides of March, the Fall of the Titan. In 44 BC, the Roman Senate appointed Julius Caesar as dictator perpetuus, granting him the right to hold the office for life. At 55 years old, Julius Caesar remained indomitable, and his ambitions seemed boundless, which increased the insecurity of his opponents in the Senate, who began to plan a conspiracy against the great general's life. The main instigator of the conspiracy against Caesar was the praetor Gaius Cassius Longinus, who spared no effort to convince other members of the Senate to join his cause. On March 15, 44 BC, Julius Caesar headed to the theater of Pompey, where a session of the Roman Senate was to take place that same day. Mark Antony became aware of a plan to assassinate Caesar, and he rushed to warn Caesar of the danger. Upon entering the Senate, Caesar was cordially received by the senators. Among them was his nephew Marcus Brutus, for whom Caesar held great affection. To avoid arousing suspicion, one of the senators handed Caesar a scroll containing a petition for him to analyze. The other senators approached, feigning interest in reading what was written on the scroll. At this moment, the closest senator drew a dagger from his cloak and grabbed Caesar's toga. Julius Caesar tried to free himself from his attacker, but the senator began to shout for help, demanding the participation of the other members of the conspiracy. Caesar was attacked by 60 senators, being mortally wounded by about 23 dagger blows. One of the last attackers was his own nephew Marcus Brutus, who is said to have delivered the final blow. In an irony of fate, Caesar fell at the foot of Pompey's statue, and when he looked up, he saw his nephew's face. And with his last strength, he pulled part of his cloak to cover his face, thus avoiding the shame of looking into the traitor's eyes. Julius Caesar had survived countless battles and challenges in his life, and now lay inert on the cold marble of the Roman Senate. There are no precise records of Julius Caesar's last words. The phrase "et tu, Brute" is crystallized in popular imagination, but this was a creation of William Shakespeare in his play depicting Julius Caesar. However, writers like Suetonius and Plutarch believe that Caesar did not say a single word at the moment of his death. After Caesar's assassination, most senators quickly fled the Senate, fearing being caught by soldiers loyal to Caesar. The conspirators believed that with Caesar's death, they would bring the city's political power back into the hands of the Senate, but they did not count on the popular revolt this would cause. Caesar was seen as a hero by most of the Roman population, and when news of his death spread, the citizens of Rome began to gather en masse to protest the event. Julius Caesar's body was requested to be cremated in a public place, as was the tradition of the time. A large number of people attended the ceremony, and as a gesture of farewell, they threw wood and personal objects onto the funeral pyre, causing the fire to rise to such an extent that it damaged the Senate building. The crowd pursued the conspirators Cassius and Brutus, who, amidst the confusion, managed to flee to Greece. Queen Cleopatra and her son Caesarion were in Rome at the time, but returned hastily to Egypt after Julius Caesar's death. Mark Antony publicly read Julius Caesar's will in the public square, where he appointed his great-nephew Gaius Octavius as his successor and gave him the right to use the name Caesar. Gaius Octavius changed his name to Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian, and some years after his uncle's death, he was proclaimed the first Roman emperor, and subsequent Roman emperors began to include the name Caesar in their own names. And so, the story of Julius Caesar came to an end, but the name of this remarkable man became synonymous with greatness.